Hey guys, thanks for joining us again for the Little Real Estate Podcast. Today we're super excited to have Erica Carter, the Vice President of Sales with HistoryMaker Homes, joining us. Thank you for being on the Little Real Estate Podcast. It's really an honor to be here. So I'll let you just do a quick intro, who you are, who you work for, and then we'll go from there.
My name is Erica Carter. I am the VP of Sales for HistoryMaker Homes.
Awesome. Today, Erica, is a big day, not just in the new construction world, but in the real world. The real world, yeah. Yeah, today, for those of you watching and listening, is Election Day. It's Presidential Election Day.
Yes.
So that is where I wanted to start our conversation. Obviously, no surprise, or I don't think you could not know that there's an election going on right now. If you've turned on your TV or walked outside, it's very apparent. And so my first question I want to ask you is, what have you seen, or how has the presidential election affected real estate from a new construction sales perspective? Have you guys had conversations about that behind the scenes? Has that affected things?
We have. We've seen a complete slowdown in preparation for the election. Usually, historically, around this time of year, we expect rates to drop. We haven't seen that this year. So with the uncertainty in the market and with the election, buyers are holding off on deciding to purchase. It's more of a wait and see approach.
Yeah. Did you guys anticipate that?
Any election year, we know that it's more volatile than most. But we anticipated, again, at this time that people would be taking advantage of reduced rates. Mm-hmm. We're just not seeing that.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, from our perspective too, after the Fed cut interest rates, thought that mortgage interest rates would be lower. And so we've had the conversation over and over and over again with people. Federal interest rates, or the Fed funds rate, and mortgage interest rates are related, but they're not necessarily brother and sister. It's not a one-to-one. So I think you're spot on, at least from the mortgage side of things, with interest rates going back up, now close to 7 again. And today being election day, I think there's a lot of volatility. But I just wanted to see what you guys were thinking or seeing from the new construction side. So, okay, so let's go back.
Yes.
I like to always start the podcast with your story. So where did you grow up? Where are you from?
I am Texas born and bred.
Awesome.
I grew up in mid-cities, so I was born in Bedford. I've lived in Texas my entire life. Yeah. My husband and I spent a short stint in San Antonio. Okay. When my oldest was born, I have 3 boys.
Nice.
I'm a mother of 3 boys,
awesome.
Ages 12, 8, and 4.
Wow.
Yes, but
I'm surprised you're here.
Yes. I am too, most days.
Yeah,
I have a
awesome.
wonderful husband who really helps take care of the load so that I can do what I do. And so I entered into real estate. Really, I was in property management prior to being in the real estate industry. So it was a natural progression for me.
Yeah.
But I entered into the real estate market back in 2013 in San Antonio with Pulte Homes. And I spent 10 years there. Most recently, I was at Trophy Signature as their director this past year, and then now I'm a VP of Sales with HistoryMaker.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go back. Your first job in real estate was in property management?
It was, yes.
Was that in the commercial side or residential side?
Residential side.
Got it.
Yeah.
How did you stumble into that?
I had an aunt that was she sold carpet for different townhome communities, and she said, I think my niece would be really good for this market. Yeah. So started making money and never looked back. Yeah. So it was nice to be in an industry where you eat what you kill. Yeah. And I've been in that ever since.
Okay, so your aunt got you connected and you were doing property management, residential property management. What's the story behind you getting connected with Pulte and then moving into the new construction space?
I had a girlfriend that I worked with in property management that made the jump prior to. So she was always explaining, come on over here, the commissions are better, hours are better, really have more autonomy to build your own schedule. And I took her advice and made that decision.
So what was your first role with Pulte?
I was a sales consultant.
Okay, so you were
sales
boots on the ground.
I was.
What did you like about doing that?
I loved the ability to interact and connect with families. My first neighborhood was a new one in the Helotes area in San Antonio. So my demographic was a lot of young families. Yeah. So being able to help them see that they could afford a home was really nice. Additionally, the commissions, if I'm being honest,
Yeah.
the commissions were a big one for me as well.
No, I mean, I think if you listen to this podcast long enough, I mean, people do real estate.
Yes.
It's a good living. It's a good place to be. So speaking of, there's a lot of people who are getting started in the new construction space that would one day probably aspire to be sitting where you are with a VP of sales role. What advice would you give to that person who one day wants to have more of a leadership role within a new construction builder?
I would say lead with integrity no matter what. There's plenty of opportunity in sales of anything, even real estate, to really kind of push those boundaries. And if you consistently lead with integrity, good things will come to you.
Yeah.
And surround yourself with like-minded people. Make sure that you're not the smartest one in the room, and learn from what other people are doing that have been in the industry longer, and always learn something new. The moment that you shut yourself off to learning, you stop growing. And I've had the opportunity to sit along people that have a really nice tenure in the industry, and I've learned quite a bit from them.
Well, I'll definitely take your advice. I'm never the smartest person in the room. That one's easy for me to take and run with. No, that's great advice. And before we started the podcast, we were talking just briefly about, I asked if you listen to any podcast, and you said not really, except for this one now. You'll be dialed in after this. But
yes.
You said you listened to books. Were there any books that were transformative in your journey from starting as a new construction salesperson to where you are now?
Wish I could say that there were, but I read for pleasure, so I read for. To be honest with you, I read to get out of work, so
that's amazing.
Did not win that
so
blood.
while we're talking about, I'm a huge reader. I love to read.
Okay.
What do you like to read?
Currently, I'm reading Colleen Hoover, so the girly love stories.
Okay, so let's get back on track with your real estate journey. So you're a new home salesperson with Pulte. What was it like getting started? Because everyone talked about how hard it is to get started in real estate, and if you can make it through, the first 2 years, you can make it. So, what was your experience like? What were some of the challenges that you had overcome, and all of that goes with that?
I think they say that because they don't want you to start making a lot of money and create a lifestyle around that. So, in order to keep you humble, I would say I stayed on as if I was just getting paid my draw for the first 2 years. I was lucky to be able to do that. My husband and I obviously had a dual income, but not living outside your means is important. Yeah. And it's something that I would give advice to for young sales consultants, but they never take it. The good ones never do, and I didn't, is to give your boundaries around your time commitments. But in sales, the more you work, the more you make. So it's easier said than done. I would say that's probably the biggest struggle, not allowing yourself to burn out.
Yeah. Do you guys see that a lot?
We do, yes. And we have to force people to take their PTO. And it's for the betterment. I mean, sales is more of a mental game, making sure that you're prepared to deliver that same exciting experience for everyone walking in the door. So PTO is more than a luxury. It's really a necessity in our industry.
That's an interesting take.
So we have to force people to take their PTO.
Okay, so you've seen a lot of salespeople, good and bad, I'm sure, in your career.
Yes, at some point experience burnout.
So does everybody get to that point?
I believe so.
At some point.
Yes.
And how do you work through that? Let's say you've been doing it for a while, you've had some success, and you've lost your love for the game. Like, what do you is it too late at that point, or can you recover?
I think what you see is that the ones that you work hard for, or you feel like you're putting pieces together, they don't always come to fruition. So when you do it long enough, and I would say a couple of years really gives you the experience under your belt, and you realize you can set your boundaries and be successful, but it takes time to do so, that's when you can start setting your schedule and understanding if setting expectations with customers is everything. These are the hours of my workday. This is my family time. People get that. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, because honestly, Erica, that's not the advice that I hear in our business. And the mortgage business is similar to the real estate business. It's a 7 days a week, 365 day a year job. And it's no secret in our business, you're paid, you eat what you kill. It's a hunter's game. And so a lot of times when I'm meeting people, whether it's new sales consultants or real estate agents, one of the questions they ask is, well, are you available on nights and weekends? And of course we are, but I've been doing this long enough to know that you do have to at some point say, hey, I'm going to put the phone down, and I've got a 1-year-old baby boy and a family, and to do it sustainably over the long haul, you have to do something to keep the batteries recharged. So,
and it starts with expectations. I mean, no, somebody might be upset if they reach out in the evening and they can't get an immediate response. We're in a culture of immediacy, and I understand that. But if you have a team that sets you up for that expectation, and why, I have no issue telling my team, I have 2 children, or I have 3 children. I have a 1-year-old baby boy. People understand that. People understand when you're human and you explain and set those proper expectations.
Yeah, that was a huge fear of mine when we had Lincoln, our baby boy. We got another one on the way, by the way.
Oh my God, congratulations.
Yeah, April 24th. We're gonna
another boy?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're joining me.
Yeah, we're having 2 boys. We might as well have 3 at this point. We'll just see. We'll see what the good Lord has in store. But
boys are fun.
Yeah, if you think I look sleep deprived now, you just wait. No, you're living it.
I haven't slept in 12 years.
Yeah,
makeup does dreams.
I do think it's a great point, and it's encouraging to hear somebody in a leadership position taking a people-first approach. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't have that mindset. So, okay, so let's go back. You're at Pulte. You've done that for a few years. How long were you at Pulte?
10 years.
You did that for 10 years. How did you end up now, today, being at HistoryMaker?
So before going into HistoryMaker, I spent a year at Trophy as their director. And then from there, I took a phone call with Mike Sander, who's a big name in the business. And he was talking to me about an opportunity at HistoryMaker that they were looking for a VP of sales. And so I came in, they put me through the ringer, and I came out the other side. So I've been at HistoryMaker for about 3 months now.
Awesome. Mike Sander, so he's kind of like a legend in the...
I would say, and I say that because coming from Pulte, he hired the people that I was working under.
Got it.
So that name came up frequently, and with nothing but good things to say.
So what did he say when he called?
He was just talking to me and wanted to get to know me, wanted to hear how things were going at Trophy, and so that was that. Yeah. That's so interesting how so few times like in your career do you get those phone calls that kind of change your trajectory. I think they do. I think there are a lot of recruiters out there, so they do their due diligence, and I think that goes back to the integrity. You're going to get more phone calls than not if you have created this reputation for yourself. For being such a large industry, anybody will tell you new home sales is very, very tight-knit. Yeah. So what you do over on the west side of town versus what you do on the east side, it's the resounding. Everybody seems to know everybody, and the good and the bad.
What was the deciding factor? What made you decide, hey, I think I'm going to take this opportunity and go to HistoryMaker?
It was the people first approach. So just what we were talking about. It was really exciting to see that they are a Christ-centered company. I didn't know that prior to the interviews. Being able to work somewhere where my personal values aligned with what they were professing publicly was huge for me.
Yeah. Okay. So that's I want to double click on that because that's unique.
It is
as
unique.
far as I can tell. I haven't heard anybody say that. So, was HistoryMaker always a faith-based company? Like, is that a top-down thing? Like, how did that come to be?
So HistoryMaker is a family-owned business. They're in their 5th generation, and they have been the longest private builder in the market in Texas. So they just celebrated their 75th anniversary in October, which is incredible. In the, I guess, the cyclical nature of our business to be, even just maintaining afloat for 75 years, we all know how difficult that is. And it's really years like this where that matters more than most.
Yeah.
So
75 years, so it's 2024, so 1949.
Oh, don't ask me to do math.
Would be, let me do
You've got the
math
pen. Get out your calculator.
1949. Okay, cool. Yeah.
It is 49. Yes.
1949.
It is.
So 1949, HistoryMaker started. Who started it? Do you know? And
it's a Mitchell family.
Okay, so 75 years of business is a long time.
It is.
And I didn't actually know that HistoryMaker was the longest standing builder, I guess, in Texas.
Private
builder in Texas. That's really interesting. What do you think? I mean, I know it's only been a few months, but first impressions, what do you think is the reason for that?
Basically, when you're in there long enough and you've weathered the storm of some of these more volatile markets, you understand how to proactively pivot, if that makes sense. So they can foresee things a little bit sooner than others that might be new to the market, and so they can pivot prior to.
I wasn't in the real estate business in 2008. So in fairness, I was 12, so I wasn't selling.
No
anything.
idea. Yeah.
I should have been. If looking back, as a 12-year-old, I should have been doing.
We could all have gone back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Should have been doing mortgages then, but I was too busy playing with sticks in my backyard. So, but I was talking to a friend the other day about 2008 and just how tough it was. I've talked to on this podcast our CEO about 2008 in the mortgage business and how terrifying that was. And so I always think it's interesting in real estate to look back over the history. 75 years is such a long time, and I think 2008, how tough that was and how many people didn't weather that storm, and even the past 3 years of interest rates really tripling from historic lows and then staying high. Companies have continued to thrive, and HistoryMaker being one of those. So that's kind of the story behind HistoryMaker. What HistoryMaker today. What are y'all doing? What's the goal? What's the ideal client? Kind of fill me in on from a sales perspective what you guys are aiming to do over the next few years.
Historically, HistoryMaker has leaned on the idea of more home, less money. So we have now tasked our purchasing team, our sales team to elevate to the next level. The current land that we're sitting on is going to be more in those A and B locations, raising up our average sales price to about $550. So we're in full transition mode at HistoryMaker.
Interesting.
We're publishing brand new plans, brand new elevations, bringing in all of the latest in optionality for the customer. So we are, I call it elevating to the next level.
Yeah.
No longer selling value, selling high end, really.
Yeah. What's the logic behind that? Why make that transition?
We have seen so many builders as they're going out to the fringe, really kind of having to decontent their homes and needing to bring options out in order to survive on those fringe markets and to make their homes affordable. So that's going to leave a gap in what's available for our move-up buyers. And so, again, Mike and the team have decided that HistoryMaker will fill that gap.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So looking down the road, is that going to change? Does that change the way you sell? If you're transitioning, I mean, I think you've got as the VP of sales, you got to be thinking, okay, well, how we've been selling value based,
right?
And now we're selling. I don't want to use the word quality because the houses aren't quality now,
right?
But more luxurious,
yes,
value add product. Is that something that's been on your mind?
Absolutely. When we coach with the team or when we spend time in training, we are transitioning from affordability to a luxury approach. So we have to step up our game on the sales side as well. Now we're selling to people who have the ability and the means to be able to purchase anywhere, really, versus now we're just showing somebody that they can't afford home ownership. Yeah. Now it's why would they afford home ownership with HistoryMaker?
Yeah. What is this new approach, is it going to change the geographies, the locations that you guys build in?
It will. So we are being in those A and B locations, again, being that they've been around the industry for so long, they have infill land that they've been sitting on for a while that we're going to be able to build and develop so that they can actually develop their land as well. Yeah. And so now we actually get to build on those lots that they've been sitting on for a while.
Yeah. Okay, you said, was it backfill? Or infill?
Infill, lotion.
I went to Texas A&M, so I don't know what that means. What does that mean?
So infill, so when I said everybody's going out to the fringe, so call it going down to, and we still have locations in Waxahachie, but going down south, going down up into Sherman and things of that nature, all of those lots that we're sitting on, we're not making any more land. So the only way that you have it, if you have these infill pockets of land, which are more desirable from a geographic perspective.
Yeah. That's really interesting because I don't, obviously, I'm a mortgage banker, so I don't fully understand the new construction space, but it does seem like it's always on the outskirts. Like when you look at different builders' websites, it's always kind of surrounding the DFW area. So I guess what you're saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is inside of those rings is more expensive land and ultimately a more expensive product as a result of that.
And better school districts.
Yeah.
So again, and that's why the land that we're sitting on, being the value on that land itself, we needed to elevate our product to bring in that higher average sales price.
Yeah. So HistoryMaker is not a single market builder. And by that I mean you're not just building in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right?
Right. We're also in San Antonio and Houston.
Okay. So do you also oversee San Antonio and Houston?
I do not.
As well? Okay. So you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth.
Yes.
The one that matters.
The one that matters.
Yeah,
the one that's doing very well.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm glad you said that because I don't know anything about San Antonio and Houston. I actually did live in Houston for a year, which was really cool. Did you know, fun fact, that Houston is the culinary capital of the world?
I did not know that.
And by that I mean like in diversity. So like you can have truly any kind of food. Like there'll be a Lithuanian restaurant next to a Nigerian restaurant next to, like it's just such a diverse. It's actually, this is also true from a demographic perspective, it's more diverse than New York City is.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. Houston's got a lot of...
The true melting pot.
It is the true melting pot. And they probably have isn't that a restaurant?
It is, the melting pot. The fondue restaurant, yes. They have one of those.
Too. Anyway, that has nothing to do with real estate. But I did live in Houston. I love Fort Worth. That's where I live now. I wouldn't trade it. What I was going to say is, you're overseeing the DFW market. What is your prediction? Obviously, no crystal ball, but what does the future look like for DFW? Because the reason I ask that is during COVID 2020 and 2021, it was gangbusters here. Everybody in the world wanted to be in Dallas-Fort Worth. Has that continued? And I've got a dual question here. And what do you think will the future look like?
Absolutely. Despite the holdback of people waiting to see what the results of the election are, we have multiple industries that are bringing their hubs to DFW. So we still remain the best industry overall, housing industry for Texas overall. So that's not changing anytime soon, and that's even just our affordability in comparison to the other states. So that's why I'm cautiously optimistic that once the election and the media dies down, that the pent-up demand from everybody that needs to move to Texas will start trickling in the first quarter.
Yeah. Okay, so I had to throw this out there because I did stalk you on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Did you go to A&M?
I did. I had a brief stint at A&M.
Okay.
I did not complete
but
my
you
college.
Were there. You were there.
Showed up. Did not bleed maroon.
A few times. Well, I know. I've picked up that you're not like a diehard.
Wasn't a diehard.
Aggie.
There were a lot of people there that were, and it's a great place if you're dialed in.
Yeah, and HistoryMaker is kind of an Aggie.
Yes, the owner was an Aggie. There's quite a few.
Well, I was in the core at A&M.
Okay.
Which is again total nerd, but I was like shaved head.
But that's cool there. Like that's the thing there.
Yeah, it was. It was fun. It was honestly a ton of fun. It was some of the best memories of my life. But
Reveille the dog.
Yeah, there's Reveille the dog. See,
I mean, I was there long enough to know.
You were there. How long were you there? Can I ask?
I was there for a year.
You're like, okay, so you made it through 2 semesters.
I did.
It's kind of a cult, so you either love it or you hate it.
I was in the business school there.
Okay.
I made the decision to leave. Went and learned some life lessons.
Yeah. Did you go from that? Sorry, we're going backwards here.
Yes.
Did you go from that
to property management? Yes.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So you jumped right on in.
Jumped right on in.
And once you start making money, it's hard to go back.
It is hard to go back once you start making money.
So
it makes it a harder road for you as well.
Yeah.
This is just my own personal thing, but when I sat down with the division president of Pulte when I was in San Antonio, he told me as I was coming on as sales consultant, he was like, well, if you ever decide you want to be in management here, you'll have to go back to school. So I can say that I didn't go back to school and I've done pretty well in my career.
Yeah, this is totally off topic. My high school guidance counselor was like, it was time to pick colleges, and I didn't have a great GPA, to be honest. I had a great time and played football and ran track, and I was good at those things. But and I had a good ACT score. But anyway, I wasn't top 25%, and I was like, I really want to go to Texas A&M, and she was like, oh, buddy, like, you're not going to get in. She was just like, I mean, I've been doing this forever. There's no way. Why don't you look at it? I'm not trying to say
Blinn.
this is.
She was saying
well,
Blinn.
she was saying Blinn. She said OSU for all the Cowboy Go Pokes. Sorry about that. But she was like, oh, you're trying to try OSU. It's a little bit easier to get into. And I was like, no, I really want to go to Texas A&M. Probably in my naivete, I applied, and knowing that I wasn't auto admit, and it was basically like when I was applying, it was like if you're not auto admit, like you're not getting it. And I wrote, this is the salesperson in me, I wrote the 3 best essays that I poured my heart out into these like application essays,
Oh yeah.
I had it,
Yes.
and somebody read them, and that's how I got in. So
Wow.
I sold my way into Texas A&M.
No, isn't it funny how people drive you that way? I mean, such a small thing, but it impacts the way that you just push through.
Yeah, it changed my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And going to A&M that's where I met my wife. Have a baby now.
I love
as we already
that.
talked
Yes.
about. So
Future Aggie, I'm sure.
future Aggie.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got my maroon shirt on.
Of course.
Today.
Natural progression.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you knew too. I own my own Pilates studio. It's called
Like
Prayers.
you do?
Yeah, it's called Prayers and Pilates, and it's
Seriously?
a Christian-based reformer Pilates and infrared sauna studio.
What?
Yes.
How do you have time?
I don't have time.
How are you even here? Thanks for coming.
I'm
really
here.
honored.
But
okay,
yeah.
wait. So now you got to tell me about that. How did you
Yes.
get? Are you a
So
Pilates instructor?
I am an instructor. I don't instruct at the studio, but
Okay.
we opened actually October 1st of this year, and we are
Like a
already
month ago.
in the green. So God is good. It's a Christian-based studio, so we open every class with prayer.
That's cool.
Yep.
Pilates. Okay, so I've got really limited knowledge. I know more about real estate than I do yoga and Pilates and
Yes.
whatever.
Yoga and
Those
Pilates are not related.
They're not related. I was trying to say that before you did.
Yes.
Because I knew you were about to correct me. They're not related, but
No.
in my mind, they
They're
live in the
might be the
same
same.
world. They're in the same planet, at least. Okay, so Pilates generally is not a faith. Does it have any spiritual? Because I know what I was going to say is yoga has like a
does.
spiritual namaste.
Right.
I don't know if that's from Lion
Chakras.
King.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
Namaste.
Is that?
That's Hakuna Matata.
Okay,
Yeah.
Hakuna Matata is Pilates.
Yes.
So is there any of that in Pilates, or is it truly just that?
There's not. So
Okay.
we brought the Christian element to our studio.
Very cool. Was that your idea?
It was, yes.
How long had you been thinking about doing it? Was this like I guess my question is.
Did I wake up one morning
Yes.
and say no?
Yes.
So I had completed my 500-hour certification that year prior
Oh my God,
to
500
teach.
hours?
Yes. They are very, very particular about their certifications.
Yeah.
And I built a studio in my house, and it became a place where my kids were always there, so we were working out together.
Yeah.
And then it became a place for us to pray together. So when I found the space, which it's in Roanoke by my house,
Yeah.
it's pretty close, I was like, what are we going to name it? And Prayers and Pilates was what was on my wall.
Yeah.
So we pulled that, and it's actually it's where we are in our location.
Wow. That is just so cool and unique and really encouraging, honestly. Because I'm a person of faith and Christian faith, that is specifically. I'm building a little team over here and would like to integrate faith into it. And I think it's an interesting thing in real estate. Like, obviously, there's a financial aspect to it. Like, this is why a lot of people do what we do. But, which is why a lot of people do everything they do as far as employment. But what's unique about real estate is it is such a big life milestone. This is where people will eat and have babies and raise their families and pray and do Pilates if you're Erica.
Exactly.
And so, and from our side and the mortgage side, the advice you give is and it's really impactful. You probably haven't read this book because it's not by
Colleen Hoover.
But there's a book by Tim Keller. Do you know who Tim Keller is? You ever heard that name? He's a Christian author. But he wrote this book called Every Good Endeavor, and it's about how like everything you do can have like a gospel tie back to it. Like, because I think sometimes you look at your job, or at least I look at my job, I'm like, well, what the heck does doing mortgages or being in real estate have to do with furthering the gospel or sharing your faith or whatever, and it has everything to do with it, as is everything. So there's my little Sunday sermon.
There you go.
For you guys there.
I'll have to check out that book.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Every Good Endeavor. It's a really good book. No one falls in love or anything in it. It's just
way to spoil it for me.
Yeah,
I had really high expectations.
Tim Keller's not a romance novelist, but okay. I want before we get too far off track and never make it back, which I don't regret talking about the prayer and Pilates thing. That's really cool. We'll have to go check it out. I don't know how to do Pilates. What do you think is the biggest challenge for that you see for HistoryMaker, and probably new construction in general? What do you think is the biggest challenge going into 2025?
I think we have solved, and HistoryMaker and other builders have solved for the interest rate hike. So we're currently offering forward commitments. That'll bring you a fixed rate of 4.99, which we know pre-COVID, 4.99 was palatable. Yeah. I guess overcoming the expectation that it's going to get any less than that, or that even starting in the new year that we're going to see a huge impact on rate reductions. Still, it's been our biggest hurdle to overcome.
Yeah. Is the rates.
Yes.
So you think going into 2025 that's going to continue to be a persistent
I think
thing?
So, but I don't know.
Yeah.
So I really don't know.
No, that's honestly, I appreciate that answer because so many people explain capital markets and what's going on in mortgage rates and treasuries and mortgage-backed securities, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Yeah. And the truth is, nobody knows what's going to happen.
I don't know.
It's
Any
impossible to know.
Yes.
It is impossible to know. Okay, I do want to talk about something real quick from a technical perspective. You said you guys are doing forward commitments. What in the world is a forward commitment?
So we have purchased tranches or groups of money in advance at a reduced rate with the mortgage companies through their banks. I would assume you obviously know more than I do about this. I'm like, I think I'm going off the rails here. All I know is that there's money there and we buy it down. Okay. Yeah. And that we're purchasing those in advance. So we're buying down the rate for buyers.
Yeah.
For instance, we have a pool of money that we purchased at a 4.99 interest rate.
Got it. So a forward commitment is kind of like you're prepaying for somebody to get a lower interest rate.
That's correct.
If they buy your product.
Yes.
Has that, and I actually don't know the answer to this. You may.
Yeah.
Obviously, interest rates went up a lot over the past few years. Before that, was that a thing? Were people doing forward commitments pre-COVID?
I can't remember any time that we were doing it pre-COVID.
Yeah. That's super interesting. Is that common? Are most builders doing forward commitments these days?
They are. I believe every builder that I know has some sort of forward commitment that they're offering to buyers today.
Yeah. Why do that instead of, and we're kind of getting into technical here, but why do that instead of just offering a concession at closing?
It has to do with max contribution rates, like limits for loan limits. But it allows us, when we do that, to still offer money towards closing. So we have closing cost incentives on top of the forward commitments. But if we did not offer the forward commitment, we would use up those dollars, bringing down the rates, and we'd hit a 6% cap a lot sooner, and it wouldn't be available for us to also cover closing costs. So it's really all a benefit to the buyer.
Gotcha. So if I'm hearing you correctly, by doing a forward commitment, you can both give a really low interest rate and cover their closing costs without running into the interested party contribution.
Yes. Yes.
I'm exposing my mortgage nerdness.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, and that's so creative because I don't remember forward commitments being a thing before. Obviously, interest rates were going to historic lows time after time for 40 years, from the 80s until 2020. But
buying down the rate is not a luxury that we're offering our buyers. For some, it's the ability to even purchase, and that has to do with debt to income ratio and of that nature.
That's interesting. Do you think that if you didn't do a forward commitment, there would be people that wouldn't make it across the
Absolutely.
So it's not just a luxury to have, it's a necessity.
It is a necessity.
For folks to be able to afford. That's an interesting point. I think the Housing Affordability Index, for those of our listeners that care to dive into this, some of them will be real estate agents, a lot of them will be real estate agents, and builder folks too, but the Housing Affordability Index measures what you're talking about. Like if you take the average American's financial situation, take the average, or I guess median sales price, and then the median or average interest rate, and it tells you like, can the average American afford the average house? Last time I looked, it's been a while, but last time I looked, you had to have a 5.5% interest rate for the average American to be able to purchase the average house. So interest rates today are close to 7%,
Right.
which, as they say, as the kids say, the math ain't mathin'. For a lot of people, like
Right.
it doesn't work, and so to be able to offer a 4.99 fixed rate is really the key to getting it to work. Do you guys do? I've seen some even lower interest rates than that. Is there anything else you do to get interest rates even lower than that?
If you've seen lower interest rates with us, it would be that we can offer those closing cost incentives towards a 2-1 buy down,
Okay.
which allows for that first year to be bought in at a 2.99 and their second year at a 3.99.
Yeah.
And then the remainder of their 30-year loan would be at that 4.99.
Okay, so you're saying you can get even lower, you can get even more aggressive
Absolutely.
than a 4.99. So if somebody walks in the door to a HistoryMaker house, which I'm imagining this happens, and they say, oh, we'd like to wait for interest rates to come down. I imagine a pretty good question would be, okay, what interest rate would you feel comfortable purchasing at? And if it's, if it's lower than 2.99, then you just shouldn't buy a house.
Right.
You're never going to get there.
Right.
But I feel like most people think, oh, if interest rates got to 5 or 4.5, then I'd buy a house. And it's funny because it's like, well, they're there,
Right.
just depending on where you go. Here's a statistic I saw the other day. And again, my fact checkers will fact check
Yes.
this, but and you may too. But I saw a graph, and this is nationally, but for the first time in since they've been keeping the record of it, so I'll say history. I don't know if that's somebody's going to be like in 1832. This is different, but in recent history, this is the first time that new construction homes are cheaper than resales. That hasn't happened before, and so I've been talking to our clients that come in who don't know what they're going to buy. Are we going to buy a resale? Are we going to buy new construction? I've been telling them, hey, you really ought to consider new construction because this is, like I just said, the first time ever that this has happened, and it probably won't stay this way. And so not only are the prices lower, but you have these incentives for lower interest rates, closing costs incentives, and so it's a unique time. I've likened it to, like, if we went back to 2008 and I gave you $10 million, what would be the smart thing to do? It'd be to buy every house you possibly could because
Right.
prices had just crashed. I think right now in new construction, we're having one of those moments where we're all going to look back and be like, dude, do you remember when we had the forward commitments and the closing cost incentives and the low prices, and we should have all bought 15 HistoryMaker houses? So I think that's really interesting. So, okay, that has been a challenge and probably will continue to be one. What do you think is the biggest opportunity for you guys going into 2025 as we wrap up the year?
Well, and just to speak to what you were saying earlier, why is now the time to buy? Because you're getting the best of both worlds. We solved for the interest rate issue, and prices are still lower. There is not a builder out there that's had the opportunity in the market that we're in this year to push pricing. So as we see that demand come back, and there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, builders will take the opportunity to gain some of the margin that they have lost in purchasing these forward commitments, doing these house price reductions. So right now, in this moment, having the low cost home plus the forward commitment and the low interest rates, this will go away. As soon as people start coming back and start purchasing homes, builders will take that opportunity to recoup the margin that they've lost.
You got it. So we're just peeling the curtain back here. Right now, builders are not making as much money as
Absolutely
they'd like
not.
to be.
The forward commitments are expensive. If you think about per home, I think we're spending up to $29,000 just in that forward commitment to really add that affordability to the interest rate. However, pricing is also, there's a lot of inventory out there today, so builders are getting aggressive, and with that comes loss of margin.
Yeah. Man, that's super interesting. So I know you just said this, but you think this is almost like a buying window, right? Like this isn't going to be this way forever.
Right.
It hasn't been this way.
Right.
And so we're kind of in a really nice window to look
Absolutely.
at.
You
Interesting.
have builders needing to offload inventory homes that they've been sitting on. You have the reduced rates. You have people covering closing costs.
Yeah.
And to the point that you were making earlier regarding the resale market, That's why I spoke to the fact that the reduced interest rates are allowing people to purchase, because we are seeing first-time buyers. The reason we're not seeing move up as much in this current market is because that resale that you said was older, they can't offload their resale. So they can't move out of that, or they purchased when rates were 3, that we'll never see again. So
they're stuck.
They're stuck. So now, in order for us to continue selling these homes, it's the people that are renting and showing them how you're essentially throwing that money away into somebody else's asset versus creating wealth for yourself. But at the same time, you have to consider that debt to income ratio.
Yeah.
And that's where the 499s, the 299s, those really allow buyers to get into the home.
What percentage of HistoryMaker sales are first-time buyers? Do you know, roughly?
I don't.
Good chunk?
Yeah, I would say a good chunk now. Yeah.
And here's another question. I do want to touch on this real quick. Does HistoryMaker pay 3% commissions to real estate agents?
Absolutely. And in some neighborhoods, up to 4%.
Got it. Was that a strategic decision?
Yes.
So obviously this year was a really big year for real estate agents with the NAR settlement. We could probably do a whole podcast about the implications of that and all that goes into that. But the way I understand it, or probably the way that it affects real estate agents most, and we have 4,500 real estate agent partners that Service First works with. So we see this a lot. After the settlement, they don't know where their income's going to come from a resale perspective. If you go find a house that's listed on 123 Main Street and it's a resale, there's really no way to know what they're paying until you call. And then if you do call, it may be 1%, maybe 2%, maybe 5%, but it's all over the board. And most of the people I've talked to are saying they're seeing average commissions dropping in resale from 3 to 2 to 2.5%. So I think it's really interesting that you guys are leaning into that.
Yeah, HistoryMaker has always supported the realtor community. We have something called our Diamond Realtor List, which is a tiered program. After their first sale, they're tiered up to a higher commission. So, and then we've got that list of ongoing loyalty. So it's something that, especially during this time when there is uncertainty with the realtor community, we wanted to make sure that we put our foot forward and said, come to HistoryMaker, we're going to continue to take care of you.
Yeah, it's like HistoryMaker is like a safe haven. If you're a real estate agent and you take your client to HistoryMaker, in this case, then you're going to get paid. Where if you go down 123 Main Street, who knows? Yeah. I think that's really interesting. I think it's one of the advantages of new construction is that from an agent perspective, it's consistency. It's like we talked about, people do these jobs to feed their families and make an income and should be compensated for that fairly. So I just wanted to touch on that because I thought that was an interesting point. Okay, the last question, and then we can get out of here, is if somebody's looking for a house, why in the world should they buy a HistoryMaker home? Here's your sales pitch.
Yes, here's my sales pitch. I think they should buy a HistoryMaker home because after 75 years, we know how to do it. We know how to do it right. And that speaks to the people that we have walking you through the process. And then our ability to provide the best incentives out on the market, offering that 499 incentive with an additional 2-1 buy down and allowing that affordability to hit the marketplace and allowing homeowners to purchase our homes, that's huge.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me.
This was a lot of fun. It was a great conversation. You're a natural. Thanks so much.
Thank you.